Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. So this coming weekend, I've got a really interesting series of events. It's not just one event, it's a series of events to tell you about. It's the sixth Canadian Chopin piano competition that's being held from January the 9th to the 13th at the TELUS Center for the Performance and Learning. And to talk a little bit about this event, a little bit about Chopin, a little bit about music, a little bit about piano, a little about teaching, a little bit about what to do when you're a kid or a teenager and you got some extra time and you want to become musically involved, is Dr. Janet Lopinski. Janet Lopinski is the Senior Director at the College of Examiners and Academic Promics at the Royal Conservatory. She's enjoyed a multifaceted career as a pianist, a teacher, an adjudicator, a lecturer, an author, and she's inspired and mentored students and teachers from across North America. She's also the founder and president of the Canadian Chopin Society, which presents this Canadian Chopin competition every 5 years. Dr. Janet, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you so much for having me. I'm delighted to have this opportunity to share information about our wonderful event and, more broadly speaking, about the music of Chopin.
So tell me, why Chopin?
Why Chopin? Well, because everybody loves the music of Chopin. And why does everybody love the music of Chopin is a great way to start our discussion. I think the music of Chopin has a universal appeal. It is rare to find a pianist who doesn't have the music of Chopin in their repertoire. It is rare to find a piano teacher who doesn't include it in their work. It's rare to find a piano student who doesn't play the music of Chopin, and a music lover who doesn't have Chopin, well, back in the day, LPs, now CDs, and now music in their streaming, written by Chopin. There's just something special about his music that speaks, I think, to people from all over the world, all different backgrounds, all different ages. It's a mixture of just the brilliant virtuosity that comes from the fact that Chopin himself was such an amazing pianist by all accounts. The beautiful lyricism. He's been called the poet of the piano. People say he's the one who taught the piano to sing, beautiful singing lines. On top of that, he was a patriotic Pole. There's the element of Polish nationalism in his music. And there is just the ability to convey timeless feeling and emotion through his music.
Tell us a little bit about his life. When did he live?
He was born in 1810 in a small village just outside of Poland. He spent the first 30 years of his life in Poland. And then he went on what was meant to be a concert tour of Europe and ended up in Paris and stayed there because of the political turmoil in Europe and became an important part of Parisian society. He associated with all the great artists and musicians of the time. He played many, many salon concerts, not so many public recitals, just because of his temperament. He was a very important influence on not just the musical life in Paris at the time, but of course on the work of generations of other composers to follow him. His life story is very interesting. I think his music itself reflects the story of his life in many ways. There is a large number of works that show that Polish connection, the dances like the mazurkas and the polonaises, the songs set to poems by Polish poets. But the importance of the salon recital that I mentioned, the waltzes, the nocturnes, the smaller pieces, miniatures that were well suited to that venue, as well as the large scale works like the concertos and sonatas. And all of these works, of course, are featured in the upcoming Chopin competition that I know we'll talk about a little later. But you'll have great opportunities to hear all of these pieces played by young pianists who are coming to this music fresh, full of new ideas.
So tell us why the competition and why every 5 years?
So the competition is held in conjunction with the International Chopin competition that happens in Warsaw, Poland. every 5 years on a 5-year cycle. Ever since the 1920s, and the 5-year cycle has only been broken a few times during the Second World War, and in the pandemic, there was a 1-year delay during the COVID pandemic. But other than that, it's 5 years, like every 5 years, like clockwork. And since 1999 here in Canada, there was an idea put forward in Mississauga, Ontario, actually, at the Polish Cultural Centre, that it would be great to have a competition in Canada to identify Canadian pianists who then the Canadian Chopin Society could sponsor their travel to go to Poland to participate in that international competition. Now, the international competition itself is like the Olympics, really, of piano playing. Young pianists come from all over the world to compete. They plan years in advance, just as Olympic athletes do, and they train for it. And interestingly enough, the origins of the competition came in the 1920s in Poland from the idea of making it more appealing for young people to want to prepare and work hard to practice music, just as athletes did to prepare for sports events. And the element of the competition would make it more exciting and more interesting for pianists to prepare.
And the first couple of days are free, and then the final performance is a ticketed performance. Is that correct? And where can people go to get information?
Yeah, that's correct. Here in Canada, I'll just give a little more background, which is that we started off at the Polish Cultural Centre in Mississauga, and gradually, as the competition expanded and grew, it has moved now to the beautiful venue at the Royal Conservatory, the TELUS Centre for Performance and Learning. So for the first 3 days, we have preliminary rounds, quarterfinals for the seniors, semifinals for the intermediates, and these are all held in Mazzoleni Hall, the smaller hall. Beautiful performance venue, and there is no tickets for that. You can come. I advise people to come early because it will probably fill up, but you can come and walk in and listen to portions of it as your schedule permits. On the 13th, we have the finals for the intermediate and senior division in Kerner Hall. Beautiful, magnificent performance venue, world-class hall that artists all love to play in, and I'm sure that the pianists will enjoy it. It will be during the day for the finals, and in the evening there will be a gala winners concert where we will announce the winners and highlight them with their performances, and those are ticketed events. You can go to CanadianChopinSociety.ca for more information about those tickets, or directly to the Kerner Hall box office.
Fantastic. Sounds like a great event, and a great event to promote and to encourage young musicians to participate in. So thank you very much for doing that. We're going to take a break for some messages and come back in just 2 minutes and talk a little bit more about music and playing the piano and Chopin with Dr. Janet Lopinski, the Senior Director at the College of Examiners and Academic Programs at the Royal Conservatory, and talking about the Canadian Chopin competition. Stay with us, everyone. Back in 2 minutes. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. We're talking about piano playing and the Canadian Chopin competition that's taking place this weekend at Kerner Hall and the TELUS Centre for Performance and Learning. Our guest is Dr. Janet Lopinski. Dr. Lopinski, you said that you fell in love with Chopin and you wrote your doctoral thesis on Chopin. A doctoral thesis on Chopin? Like, wow! How could you spend a whole doctorate writing about one musician, one composer?
Well, just to narrow it down even further, the actual dissertation was on the preludes of Chopin. So one body of works by one composer, very interesting body of work, and more about that in a moment. But I will say that in selecting a topic for a doctoral thesis, and I started it was at the 1980s. The Berlin Wall had not yet fallen, and it wasn't as easy to travel to Poland. I was fortunate enough, or to travel to Poland and have access to libraries and documents. I was fortunate enough that I had some relatives in Poland, and one of them being a piano teacher who sent me literally sometimes mimeographed copies of writings by Polish musicologists, sometimes actual books. And I was fluent in Polish, so I was able to read Polish. And that was my focus in my dissertation, was on the Polish aspects of Chopin's music, the Polish influences, and specifically the writings that had been written by Polish musicologists about the body of works, the preludes that I mentioned. That was
Well, just let me interrupt for a second. Tell everyone that may not know what a prelude is.
Oh, well, a prelude. Thank you for asking that question. A prelude is a brief introductory work that had a long history in piano music. Often when people think of preludes, they think of organ preludes that would have been played literally to warm up the instrument at the start of a cold Sunday morning before the services. And the great composer J.S. Bach, who Chopin admired immensely, wrote many, many preludes, including the Well-Tempered Clavier, preludes and fugues, written in all major and minor keys. And this is a body of works that Chopin would have known himself. Other composers wrote preludes as well, but the piece started to develop from an introductory piece to a standalone piece. And in Chopin's collection of 24 preludes, also written in all of the major and minor keys, we see a sort of homage in a way, or a paying respects to the music of Bach, in that he also followed through all of those 24 keys. However, he did it in a different order. And of course, the preludes that he wrote encompassed many, many of the different styles that he touched on in his output. So the preludes are a series of miniature pieces. Some of them take 60 seconds to play. Some of them are a little longer, but they reflect some of the different genres, like the nocturnes, the etudes, even the mazurkas that Chopin wrote. The best way, I sometimes like to say, to get to know Chopin's music is to listen to his 24 preludes, because you get a little bit of a glimpse into all of the different styles that he cultivates in his writing.
Fascinating. And when you wrote this thesis, what were you were saying he was unique? What were you arguing in your thesis about Chopin's preludes?
Well, I was presenting, probably for the first time at that time, in the English language, the work of a Polish musicologist by the name of Józef Lopinski, who believed that the preludes were intended to be a unified whole, rather than pieces that would be played as one-offs. So when we think of Chopin's other bodies of work, for example, his waltzes, we have a number of waltzes, and some of them are in sets as an opus, but we can play one waltz or another waltz one at a time, and there is no intention to have them all performed together. Whereas Lopinski noted in his work that within the Chopin preludes, there was motivic unity, so ideas or themes that would come through in different preludes that linked them together, and also links between the way one would finish and the next one would start, leading to the idea that they were in fact conceived as a whole rather than as unique individual pieces. So that was his central focus, and I represented this in the English language for the first time. But I also took advantage of the topic by framing it with background about Chopin, the influences of his time in Poland, and how that affected and informed his composing, including his time in Polish villages, his exposure to Polish folk music. So I framed the discussion of the preludes with background about Chopin's writing and his life and his music.
You mentioned the 24 minor and major keys several times. Can you explain why that's important, and what is a major and minor key?
Well, music for a long period of time in the Western art music tradition is organized tonally using what we call keys, major and minor keys that involve a sort of hierarchy of notes that want to behave a certain way. And if you look at a piano, you see white keys and black keys arranged in a certain pattern. And there are 12 different keys, and they have names: C, D, E, F, G, A, C, C sharp, D, and so on. And any one of those notes can have a scale, either major or minor, other types of scales as well, but major or minor are the ones we're talking about, formed on that starting note. And when you listen to well, to any music, but to classical music that has been notated, it is often identified in terms of its major or minor key. So when we talk about specific pieces by Chopin, we have many pieces in the key of D flat major, Nocturne in D flat major, beautiful, many beautiful pieces in that key, and that was one of his favorite keys. And within the preludes, of course, we cover every one of those major and minor keys.
You've mentioned the connection with Polish history and Polish nationalism several times. Do you think Chopin is, special to Polish people, or is it accessible to and interesting to everyone?
Well, that's a really good question, Brian, and it's an important question. And I think it's not an either or answer, it's a both and. I think Chopin is a composer who is universally beloved, and his music transcends his Polish national identity. At the same time, that Polish identity is very important. So I'll talk about that first, and then I'll talk a little bit about how it transcends that. I would say that to Polish people, or people of Polish background, like myself, I'm born in Canada. I think of myself as a Canadian with Polish background. The music of Chopin has it becomes sort of a symbol of Polish nationalism, Polish pride, the nobility of the Polonaise, and the heroic quality of it represents to many people Poland's independence, Poland's fierce patriotism and pride, the way in which the Polish people have overcome many hardships, all of those things. And in Poland, I'll tell you, Brian, when the Chopin competition is on, every single person in Warsaw is aware of it. I'll never forget the first time I traveled to Poland for that. And the cab driver asked me why I was there. And I said, I was here for the Chopin competition. And he started talking about his family tradition, and his mother listened to it on the radio when he was growing up. And she embroidered a tablecloth with musical motifs that she only worked on during the competition, and all these stories. And the average person, last time I was there, I went to get a COVID test before boarding my flight on the way home. And the person in the lab found out I was attending the Chopin competition and got all excited and called his friends in to hear me talk about having been at the winner's concert the night before. So there's a sort of, it's almost like, I don't know what to compare it to when when the hockey playoffs are going on in Canada, I don't know, football in the United States. There's a sort of all-in mentality for Chopin, and everybody is aware of it when the competition is going on in Poland. And in that sense, I would say, there are many Polish pianists who have made notably beautiful and important recordings of those works of Chopin based on their understanding of the Chopin culture, of the Polish culture. However, at the same time, there is an interest in the music of Chopin that is very, very powerful throughout the whole world. We have a high number of pianists here in Canada now who are excelling at the music of Chopin. The last winner of the International Chopin Piano Competition was Bruce Liu, beautiful Canadian pianist who has such a deep understanding of the music of Chopin. Before him, Charles Richard Hamelin was the second prize winner in the time before. Eric Woe has been the first prize winner of the International Chopin competition on period instruments. So we have this very rich tradition now of Chopin playing in Canada, and throughout the world, in Japan and China and Korea. There is a huge interest in the music of Chopin. So it is, I would say, it's not a stretch to say that his music is universally beloved.
As a pianist, do you have to focus on one composer, Chopin or Beethoven or Mozart, or do you play all?
You do not have to focus. And as a matter of fact, I think it is much better, particularly early on in the training, if pianists do not focus entirely, because it's through studying the music of the composers who came before Chopin, and to a certain extent those who came after, that one really acquires a deep understanding. So we know that Chopin loved the music of Bach, loved the music of Mozart, and not to have studied Bach and Mozart and to study Chopin in a vacuum doesn't make sense, because his music builds on those past traditions. We also acquire not just our musical insights, but our technical skills that allow us to play that very challenging, virtuosic music through playing music that leads us to that point. So it's very important. And I have to jump in here and say that the Royal Conservatory, wearing my Royal Conservatory hat from my day job, the Royal Conservatory program nurtures that well-rounded development by requiring that students who take their exams at different levels prepare music not just from one era, but from the Baroque and the Classical and the Romantic and the 20th century to cover off that well-rounded training. Now, in the professional world, though, some pianists do specialize once they've, studied a wide range of repertoire. And certainly the pianists who are preparing for the senior division, first the Canadian Chopin competition and later the international competition, if they qualify, have to narrow down their focus and focus in on Chopin for that period of time, because the amount of music they have to play is quite extensive, and it becomes a sort of drilling down and focusing in, I would say, in the period right before the
Well, it's
competition.
interesting when one competes in this competition, the Chopin competition, one doesn't play one piece, one has to play several pieces.
This is correct. The junior and intermediate divisions, which are sort of the feeder divisions, they're preparation for the senior division. And those competitors don't go on to Poland at this stage in their careers. They have to play a selection of a few pieces. The senior division, they have to prepare for several rounds of the competition. In the quarterfinals, there are specific pieces that they have to play. In the semifinals, there are specific pieces they have to play. And then if they advance to the finals in Kerner Hall, they play one of the two Chopin concertos. They don't play with orchestra, they play with a string quartet, which is actually a lovely way of playing the concertos. And then they also play the Polonaise Fantasy, which is one of Chopin's late works that requires a very special kind of maturity and understanding to bring together all the elements that are within that piece. So the competition sort of gears up to that moment. I would say overall, it's probably about 2 hours worth of music that they are playing all together, spread out through the rounds.
With sheet music or from memory?
From memory. Memorization is required. So we're talking about hours of preparation and practicing and, amazing focus. Maybe we'll have a chance to talk a little bit about the amazing focus and dedication that has to go into preparing for this, particularly for the young ones. It's so amazing to me that students reach the point these days that they can play this music with grace and beauty already at the age of 12 or 13. It's amazing.
2 hours from memory. Unbelievable. We're going to take a break for some messages and be back with Janet Lopinski talking about the Canadian Chopin competition in just 2 minutes. Stay with us, everybody. Back in two. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. We're talking tonight about a competition going on this weekend and culminating in the final performance on Monday night at Corner Hall, downtown Toronto, the Canadian Chopin competition with the organizer of it, Janet Lopinski, Dr. Janet Lopinski, who did her doctoral thesis on the preludes to Chopin. Fascinating. Dr. Lopinski, I wonder if we can elevate for a second for all of our listeners. Do you think learning the piano is still something that people should do? You know, when I was growing up, almost everyone took piano or guitar lessons. And it seems like those lessons have not as popular today when you've got AI, when you've got streaming music services, when you've got all these different ways that you can get music. I tried to sell a piano recently, and it was like I almost couldn't give it away. What's going on? Is it something that's still relevant in today's youth for people growing up today?
Well, thank you for asking that question. And I hope that I can contain my thoughts to the time that we have, because this is a really big topic for me. And my answer is, first, absolutely, it's relevant, and more so than ever before, because of all of the options that are open to kids, and all of the time we spend on devices, kids, adults, everyone in between. You know, we spend so much of our time looking at screens, whether it's, you know, to communicate with people or to learn about information. And there's something about the discipline and the focus and the beauty of learning to play an instrument that takes us away from all of that. I have to say that for myself, when things are busy and I've made it home from a long commute, or I've finished my day of work at a screen, there's nothing that brings me more joy than to go down to my piano and either get out some music or just improvise and just spend some time listening to that sound in a vacuum away from everything else. But now, going back to the importance of the study for children, we all know about the transformative power of music, and how I've spoken about the power of the music of Chopin and other composers to take us to places that we can't find otherwise, and to communicate in ways that words can't communicate. But the process of learning about music also has incredible positive effects on children and adults alike, children in particular. A lot has been written, and a lot of research has shown recently about the value and importance of music study, and it's how it affects cognitive abilities of children, how it affects confidence, communication skills, building discipline, so many things beyond just developing that skill of, being able to play. As I say, I'm dating myself, but back in my day, it was being able to play Dr. Zhivago for your parents' friends. I remember when I was a child, just about like you say, just about everybody took piano, and if your children played the piano well, you trotted them out after dinner when guests were over and had them play something for your friends, and it became sort of a social thing. I remember many times playing for my parents' friends, playing for family, playing in church, leading carol sings. It was sort of a part of the way people interacted. And, now we're more likely to plug up a device and have some music playing, rather than have that sharing of music as part of our social times.
You mentioned that they've got to memorize, these competitors have to memorize 2 hours of Chopin music, and not have sheet music to follow. If you tried to memorize a 2-hour speech, it would be impossible. What is it about music that makes it such that we can memorize? And, we all have got the experience where we hear a song again for the first time in a decade, and we know all the words. We know the lyrics, and we know the music that goes along with it. What is it about music that makes it so much easier to memorize or so embedded on the mind?
Yeah, I don't want to make it sound like it's easier. I agree. Of course, it's still a lot of hard work. But I think one of the things about it, and without getting into sort of scientific explanations, is we're dealing with a combination of different ways of remembering. So we're dealing with oral memory. Sometimes we hear something many times and we can have never looked at the sheet and we can reproduce it just because we know how it sounds. Our ear tells us that we can sing it. If we can sing it, then it's just, a walk to the piano to be able to play it. So there's that oral memory. There's also a sort of, we sometimes think of this as like motor memory, where in order to be able to get to the point where you can play Chopin etude or Chopin ballade, you've had to repeat it so many times just to get it into your fingers. And if you're learning it wisely, there's some choreography that goes into it. You plan the gestures, how you get from this place to that place on the piano. So now you're working with your ear, you're working with your body, the physical memory, and you're working with the music literacy portion where you've seen the music on the page. You read about stories about concert pianists who realized halfway to a concert that they've prepared the wrong piece, and they get out the music and they review it mentally and get the memory back, not, of course, for a piece they haven't known before, but get the memory back just by looking at the page. And I had a piano teacher who used to say to me many times, and I don't think I understood it then as a teenager, but she used to say, when you're preparing for a concert, right before the concert, make sure you're not only practicing like that, but sometimes she used to say, take the music and sit in a chair with a cup of tea and review the music away from the piano. I always found it amusing that there had to be a cup of tea to go with that. But that I recall being my early, before I studied the pedagogy of it, and as a teacher myself, learned how to reinforce all the different elements of memory, not just the motor memory, not just the oral memory, but also the visual or cerebral sort of memory of taking the music away. So I think to answer as a fairly long answer to your short question is that when I think of memorizing a speech, I'm looking at words on a page, and I may break them down into chunks, and I may have some, visual cues that I'm looking at, thinking of where I am on the page, but I don't have, the sound of the music and the different methods of memory that work together are very powerful.
There is something, even when you hear hip hop or my favorite politician speech, Jesse Jackson, who speaks like he's singing. You can memorize it. It comes together far better, far more easily when it's got a cadence to it and a rhyme to it and a musicality to it, even if it's not music, it's just speaking. So, these people, they're going to be performing and competing on stage in the senior division. Are they conservatory students? Are they from across Canada? Give us a sense of who we might see and where are they going to go? Are they going to go work for a symphony? Are they going to go teach? What's the future for one of these people? So tell us who's going to be on stage and what's their future.
Yeah, so in the senior division, there's 12 competitors. They were chosen. We had a field of 138 applicants, narrowed down to 40 in each division, who participated in a virtual preliminary round. And if any of the listeners or you, Brian, are interested in a sneak peek, on our website, CanadianChopinSociety.ca, if you go to competition and virtual preliminary round, you can actually see the performances, the recorded performances that were submitted by each of these students and were judged in the virtual preliminary round. We had applicants from all across Canada, literally from coast to coast. And from those, distinguished international jury selected 12 who will come to Toronto, 12 in each of the three divisions. And in the senior division, we have somebody from Nova Scotia. We have a number from Vancouver. We have some from Alberta. We have one from Saskatchewan, several from Quebec, and of course, a core group from Ontario. You asked if there are Royal Conservatory students. There are, in fact, spread across the three divisions. We have 16 students from the Royal Conservatory, many from the Taylor Academy, which is the preparatory program, some from the Glenn Gould School, who have been admitted to the in-person competition. So wearing my RCM hat, very proud of that, to see so many RCM students, but also many students from wonderful music schools across the country as well.
How old would these competitors be?
So the senior division competitors can be as young as 15 through to 29. We are following the age division. That's the age requirements for the international competition, because naturally we want to ensure that our top three winners, as part of their prize, they are automatically accepted into the preliminary round for the international competition. And the Canadian Chopin Society also sponsors their travel costs to participate in that competition.
15 or 16 won?
Now, this is really interesting story because in our fourth Canadian Chopin piano competition, our second prize winner, Tony Yuke Yang, who was 15 at the time, went on to compete in the international competition. He was admitted to the preliminary round. He was successful in being admitted to the main competition, and he won the fifth prize, and he became the youngest laureate in the history of the international Chopin piano competition. The youngest laureate. Yeah. Now, you also asked, what do they do when they go on?
Yeah, what becomes of someone that's 15 to 20? Do they become a piano teacher? Do they go work for a symphony? What's the future for some of these people?
Tony is a great example. He did go on to earn degrees in music and business, and then he is now traveling and concertizing. He is making a career as a concert pianist, and there are some who are able to do that. Many of them combine performing with recording and teaching. Some may work towards having university teaching positions in a set way. Some have private studios. I think we have sort of portfolio careers many of the times where people do a bit of this and a bit of that. But the really top prize winners, for example, Bruce Liu, who was the Canadian winner of the unfortunately he wasn't a Canadian Chopin competition winner. He didn't go in our competition. He went straight into the international competition and won the first prize there. And marvelous pianist who's really making his mark. He is concertizing around the world in all the major halls, and is as busy as he wants to be as a full-time concert pianist.
Concertizing. I've never heard that word before.
Giving concerts, yes.
Fantastic. We're going to take a final break for some messages and come back with our guest, Dr. Janet Lopinski, and talk a little bit about exactly how one can get to this event and enjoy it the best. Stay with us, everyone. Back in 2 minutes. So, welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. My guest tonight is Dr. Janet Lopinski, who is the coordinator, the organizer, the founder of the Canadian Chopin competition that takes place at the TELUS Center for the Performing Arts and Corner Hall this coming weekend. Dr. Lopinski, tell us, how should we do it? Like, is it fun to go to one of the preliminary rounds and find your favorite and follow them through the competition? Tell us how we should enjoy this event.
The first thing you should do, if you're interested in the event, is go to our website, CanadianChopinSociety.ca. Join our mailing list, because then we can send you updates, including updates on the results of each round. Browse the virtual preliminary round. On our website, you'll find the competition tab and you'll find virtual preliminary round. You can already identify your favorites in advance of the actual competition. Also on our website, you can find the detailed schedule of who will be playing when. If you're more interested in the juniors, you'll know when to come. If you want to follow the seniors through all three of their rounds, you'll know when to come to the earlier rounds in Matsalani Hall. Most importantly, though, you will want to get your tickets for the finals and the winners concert that happen on January 13th. You can buy individual tickets to the finals and the winners concert by going to rcmusic.ca or Googling Kerner Hall tickets, and you can buy those tickets directly from Kerner Hall. Or if you'd prefer to have a full day pass, come to our website, CanadianChopinsociety.ca, to purchase your full day pass so that you can take it all in from morning till night on the 13th. There are also opportunities to support the event, and I do need to say that this event is completely organized and put on by a team of dedicated volunteers and a board of directors who are doing this because we believe in the mission. We love the music of Chopin. We believe in wanting to have this event available for our young pianists to support their development. But of course, it is an expensive endeavor. So we are still looking for sponsors and partners. There are still opportunities to support the event in a meaningful way. We have an 88 Keys campaign where you can sponsor one of the keys on the competition as your way of helping to make it possible. And you can learn about that on our website as well. We have a few opportunities still to sponsor prizes, and we have opportunities to advertise. So please come to our website to learn more about all of that. But most importantly, plan to join us on the 13th because it really is only every 5 years that this opportunity comes up. And there's nothing like hearing these wonderful, extraordinary young pianists performing live in beautiful Kerner Hall.
So you've motivated me to go listen to some Chopin. What's the one piece that you recommend I put on my Spotify streaming right now?
Oh, wow. That has got to be the most difficult. That's like asking a parent, which of your 5 children are you going to take on your next trip? Let me see. We are in. I'm going to say
The Preludes.
the Chopin Berceuse, which is the lullaby. It's a beautiful, pensive piece. It's a series of variations written over a beautiful left-hand ostinato with some beautiful right-hand melodic figurations. Either that or the Ballade in F minor. Those would be my 2 recommendations for you. If you want a short little snippet, any one of the preludes or any one of the etudes. But
Lopinski, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. This has been really interesting, and I'm now going to be a fan of Chopin. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much.
That's our show for tonight, everybody. Thank you for joining. I remind you, I'm on every Monday through Friday at 6 o'clock on 960 AM. You can stream me online, even from Warsaw, Poland, at www.saga960am.ca. Good night, everybody.